Guys, unless you've been living under a rock, there's a good chance that you've heard of Remnant from the Ashes. This was one of my favorite games of 2019, and while this game wasn't necessarily mainstream, it caught a lot of people by surprise, and still to this day has me wanting to come back and explore the world over and over again. Now, if you don't know what Remnant from the Ashes is, it is a third-person survival action shooter set in a post-apocalyptic world overrun by monstrous creatures from another dimension. As one of the last remnants of humanity, you'll set out alone or alongside up to 2 other players to face down hordes of deadly enemies and epic bosses and carve a foothold to rebuild and retake what was lost. That alone makes you want to play the game personally. A new IP made by GUNFIRE Games, one that I actually don't believe they thought would be as successful as it was based on the lack of post-launch content that this game came with. This is a game that in some ways is described as a Soulsborne type game. Now, coming off of their most recent DLC, Swamps of Corsus, which introduced survival mode, which is a nice touch to the game, as well as new armor sets, new bosses, a few new weapons, as well as some basic color swaps on your armor that you already have, was actually a pretty big success, and only costing $9.99, it's actually not a bad deal. But over the past weekend at the PC gaming show, GUNFIRE Games decided to unveil their third and final DLC for Remnant from the Ashes, named Subject 2923. Now, while this is the final DLC, it is also the largest and easily the most interesting one yet. This DLC is going to introduce not only new enemies, new weapons, and new armor, but 2 new zones, which is what people have been wanting since after the game launched. This is going to continue to drive forward with the story, following after the downfall of the Dreamer, and now that the streets have gone quieter and more humans are braving the city trying to rebuild mankind. However, Earth is still not rid of the root just yet. As players seek out the location of the remaining root, they will make unexpected allies, traverse unfamiliar zones and dimensions, and overcome new threats to put an end to this evil force once and for all. Now, that sounds fantastic. Again, new zones, new bosses, new quest, new campaign mode. This sounds like it's going to be a huge update, one that is already going to make a game that was slightly anemic in some areas feel much larger. Even though this game had a fairly small amount of content, if I must say, I've put in numerous hours just playing the game over and over again to fully upgrade gear and weapons. So the question becomes, since this is the final DLC, which is coming on August 20th, 2020, where does GUNFIRE Games go from here? Do they decide to go off in another direction with a new IP, or do they start working on a sequel for Remnant from the Ashes? I guess it all depends on where the campaign goes from this DLC. Where does it end up once the story is settled? That's something we'll find out August 20th, but my hope and my belief is that they will start working on a sequel for Remnant from the Ashes, just based on the fact of how well this game was received and how much demand there was for more content. Anyways, guys, I hope that we see a sequel, and I can't wait to see what GUNFIRE Games comes out with next. But until then, guys, make sure to like, follow, and subscribe. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.